All right, everybody, welcome on into KBO Chats Live. I'm Sam Pascal alongside Eric Halterman, and we are breaking down everything you need to know about the upcoming KBO slate. That's right, Korean baseball is still going on, and there's a lot of edge to be had for both DFS and standard betting. Eric, it's Thursday, so we're not doing power rankings, but we do have some league news to go over, primarily with the Heroes. Their skipper resigned, and they just announced that they're going to be posting their 25-year-old stud Hassan Kim. What do you make of these announcements by the number 3 team in the KBO?
Yeah, a couple of interesting bits there. And from the news story on the manager, Hyuk-Son, they say he resigned, but apparently they're also paying him for the remainder of his 2-year deal, which is pretty unusual for a resignation and not a firing. But as far as I can tell, everybody says, yeah, it seems like he was actually just stepped down himself. Not entirely sure what's going on there. It's a bit weird because it's getting framed as a disappointing season, but it's not like it's been that bad. I mean, they reached the Korean series last year, got swept by the Bears, and they're in the mix for the 2nd seed this year, so it's not like it's a huge step back for them. Obviously, they're disappointed with how the last few weeks have gone, but a bit of an odd one. Their interim manager is Chang-Hyun Kim, who's analytics department guy, worked in the front office and just moved onto the field as a quality control coach this year. That's something we've seen in MLB a lot too, but as far as I know, we haven't had any of those guys take over a true manager job, so it'll be interesting to see if they do anything too unusual the final couple weeks. I wouldn't expect to see much from just an interim guy, but something to keep an eye on there perhaps.
Definitely unusual. And in case you're just tuning in, this is KBO Chats Live, talking everything Korean baseball. Get into our picks in just a minute here. When we check out rotowire.com/free KBO, you can take a look at the KBO standings. And when you sort by overall, home, just rank, home, road, left, and right, the Heroes are number 3 in all of those. So it's very unusual to see their manager leave when they're in a very good position to make some noise come playoff time. That's the Kiwoom Heroes there, right in number 3. Before we move into the picks, do also have to mention Eagles pitcher Chad Bell has left the KBO. He was cut by the Eagles, had a 3.5 ERA last year, ERA close to 6 this year. Any final words as the Chad Bell experience is officially over, Eric?
Yeah, unfortunately, it just seemed like injuries had him all year. He wasn't healthy to start the season. He spent 1 or 2 trips to the injured list and then hadn't pitched in nearly a month. This time with shoulder, I believe it was elbow earlier. His numbers weren't really good outside of a brief stretch, but hard to say how much that was injury all season. Not sure where he'll pop up next, but guess we're done with the Chad Bell experience over in the KBO.
Yes, a little disappointing, but he was very disappointing on his on-field product this year. So enough of overview of the league. Let's dive into some picks. First game here, NC Dinos against the LG Twins, the second best matchup on the slate, at least in my book here. The Dinos, they've cooled off since their crazy winning streak, now just 3-2-1 in their last 6. And they have a tough challenge if they want to get back on track as they're facing Casey Kelly, who's coming off 7 innings, 7 hits, and 7 strikeouts in his last performance. What do you make of this pitching matchup here in the Dinos-Twins matchup?
Yeah, the Dinos did suddenly get a bit cold, losing 2 out of 3 to the Heroes. If you remember, their hot streak was almost exclusively against some pretty weak teams, but they built up such a lead that they're basically playing without pressure here for the final few weeks. They still have a 7-game lead, so they can afford to a few losses here. And I would not make them out to be favorites in this one. Casey Kelly, he did start the year pretty disappointingly, but he's been quite good for quite a long time at this point. He's got 10 quality starts in his last 11, 2.28 ERA and a 1.04 whip over that stretch. Before then, he had a 4.65 ERA, so he's cut it more than in half. And his recent performance is a lot closer to what we might have expected from him coming into the year, considering he had a 2.55 ERA and a 1.14 whip last year. So Kelly pitching like this shouldn't be too big of a surprise. Hasn't necessarily been a dominant strikeout arm, but just a strong all-around pitcher who's now done this for most of the last 2 seasons. Not an easy matchup here by any means, but in that stretch of 10 out of 11 quality starts. He does have 1 against the Bears and 2 against the Wiz, including his last 2. So it's not as if he's really been struggling against the good teams either. This is an interesting slate for DFS purposes in that the good pitchers are facing the really good lineups. I think we'll see that throughout tonight's show, that there's a bunch of pitchers. The pitchers that you would trust are going to have some pretty tough tasks here. But I would still have some interest in Kelly for fantasy purposes tonight. It's hard to have much faith in anyone against the Dinos, but given that most of the slate is pretty uninspiring, I think there's a good chance he ends up being worth paying up for on DraftKings.
All right, and you mentioned that offense that Kelly will be facing. The Dinos are one of the best in the league throughout the entire season of production, but last 4 games, just 4 runs per game. LG, they've also pretty much cooled off. They've only scored more than 3 only once in their last 5, so not scoring a lot. Is there anyone specifically you're targeting in these lineups? And then with that, specifically with the Twins, are you worried about the Twins offense now without Roberto Ramos, as he's now officially been off this lineup for a while?
Yeah, I'd probably be avoiding the Dinos hitters tonight. I mean, they're quite good, but there's plenty of poor pitching on tonight's slate, so I don't really see much of a need to throw guys out there against Casey Kelly, though at least Sung Bum Na is hitting again after going hitless for 4 straight games, so that's good to see. On the Twins side, they were without Roberto Ramos for a few days, then he came back for all of 1 game before going right back to the injured list with an ankle issue. I believe it was ankle and back that he missed time with earlier in the year. So it seems like some sort of recurring problem for them. Definitely not good. One of the better hitters in the league, has had his slumps at times, but on the whole was excellent. They have plenty of talent, even without him. Hyun-Soo Kim is one of the best hitters in the league, second in RBI to Mel Rojas. Just a very strong all-around hitter. I actually recommended a twin stack on tonight's cheat sheet because I think Sung-Young Choi is definitely one of the more exploitable pitchers out there. I'd be looking at guys like Kim, even with the platoon disadvantage. Other guys I'd be interested in are Yun-Sung Chae and Hyung-Jung Lee on either side of him. Hyung-Jung Lee is hitting 381 with 5 homers and 14 RBI in his last 11 games. So he's been on fire. Should be interesting against Choi. Choi spent most of the last 6 to 7 weeks in the Futures League, and it's not hard to see why when you look at his season-long numbers. ERA of nearly 6, and that actually probably overrates how good he's been, at least lately. His last 3 starts, he has an ERA of 12 and a whip of 267. And on the season as a whole, he has significantly more walks than strikeouts, striking out just 10.3% of opposing batters while walking 13%. So it's a pretty terrible track record all around for the young lefty there. So I'd be pretty interested in the Twins. They are a pretty lefty-heavy lineup, so I would definitely be in on Hyun-Jung Lee and Yun-Sung Chae as the top righties. But even though Choi will have the platoon advantage against a lot of them, I still think the gap between him and Kelly is quite big.
All right. Choi going against Kelly tonight. The Twins are the favorite here at -170. The total is set at 9. What's the official pick, Eric?
Definitely Twins. Just a pretty huge gap in starting pitchers, which way more than cancels out the gap in lineups. The Dinos do have a stronger lineup, but it's not that much stronger. And I'll go over 9. 9 is quite low. I don't think Kelly will give up too many runs, but the Dinos do have a strong offense. They could maybe score against whatever relievers come in after, and I would expect the Twins to score quite a few off of Sung-Young Choi.
All right, that's what we're looking at, the NC Dinos LG Twins matchup. Moving on over, we have the Lotte Giants facing off against the Samsung Lions, 2 bottom half teams here. Adrian Sampson is going for the Giants, and he had a great 5-start stretch where he had an ERA under 2. But since then, his ERA is back to over 7. And unusually enough, he has 14 strikeouts against 2 walks in that stretch. We talk a lot about strikeouts and walks on this show, Eric. What do you make of Sampson's recent performance that's been good, but then pretty bad in terms of run prevention.
Yeah, he's been a lot better than he was to start the year. There was most of the season I would have been completely off of him. But in 6 of his last 7 starts, he's allowed 3 or fewer earned runs. He's been on 3 a decent amount because 4.02 ERA isn't elite over that stretch. Neither is a 1.34 whip, but those are both far better than what he was doing early in the year. And in his last 2 starts, he's struck out 13 against 0 walks in just 11 innings. One start against the Eagles, but another one against the Twins. That definitely counts for something. So it's definitely an encouraging run from him over his last 2, and really most of his recent starts outside of that one poor one against the Wiz. He's a low strikeout guy on the year, 15%. Is a few ticks below league average, but he also has pretty good control with a 6.3% walk rate. So he's an unexciting pitcher, and he is pitching in the league's most hitter-friendly park in this one. But he was also the second cheapest starter on DraftKings, and he's facing a pretty uninspiring Lions lineup. So I definitely would have a decent amount of interest in him. I don't think he's massively high upside by any means, but given that most of the pitcher pool here is quite weak, I think he's a passable option, which makes him better than average on this slate.
All right, Adrian Sampson is passable. Something we'll take considering his woes he had to begin this year. On the other side, on taking the bump against him, Taeyeon Wan, he hasn't won a start since August, and he has more walks than strikeouts in his last 3 starts. Is this just a standard back of the rotation, standard bad KBO type pitcher?
Yeah, he had an ERA in the high 4s last year, which suggests that he is a legitimate starter, but not a particularly interesting one. He had, for most of the year, he was pitching quite well, at least in terms of ERA. He had a 3.83 ERA heading into his last 7 starts, but over those last 7, it's an ERA of 8.59 and a whip just shy of 2, 1.98. That's 7 starts with nearly a run per inning and nearly 2 base runners per inning. So it's been a pretty extended stretch of really quite bad performance from Juan, and he's not at all helped by pitching in Daegu Samsung Lions Park here, the most hitter-friendly park in the league. So I definitely could have recommended the Giants as one of the stacks tonight. I ended up picking 2 other ones, but I would be quite interested in the Giants hitters against Juan, particularly Asap San. I did recommend him on the cheat sheet. He is the man single-handedly preventing Mel Rojas Jr. from winning the Triple Crown at the moment. He's got a 7-point lead on him in batting average. He leads the league at 358 in that category. He's hitting 449 over his last 12 games. Not much power, but an excellent contact guy. Would expect him to get on base quite often in this one against a pitcher like Juan.
Yeah, I noted that this Lotte offense has been on fire recently. 9 runs per game over their last 5. Asap San, 444 average over that span. Actually, in October, going way back to October 1st. And then Dae-Ho Lee as well, 393 average in October. Is everything pretty much just clicking for this Giants offense right now with this kind of playoff push?
Yeah, I mean, all season they've had several guys who had, OPSs in like the low 800s, so a bunch of slightly above average hitters. They don't have that 1 or 2 dominant bat at the heart of the order. A lot of their guys like Dae-Ho Lee, Junwo John, Asap San would fit in as the maybe 3rd best hitter on some of the true playoff teams, but they're pretty deep in terms of decent enough hitters, and enough of them are getting hot at the same time that they do have a chance. I believe they're still 4 games out of the 5th and final playoff spot, and they'd rather be chasing someone who isn't the Bears, who have made 5 straight Korean series. But they're getting hot at the right time. Enough of their hitters are that they're definitely going to make a push. They're going to at least be in it until the final week or so, which is pretty impressive considering where they were last year. Last in the league by quite a considerable amount.
Well, they'll still have to leapfrog the Kia Tigers at number 6, but if they keep up the way they've been playing recently, that should be no problem. In terms of Samsung's offense, it's been pretty bad recently, just 7 total runs over their last 5 games. They rank 8th in runs per game on the entire season, 4.81 runs per game, but still, this is pretty bad even for them. I mean, is there anything to look for? How's our our sleeper pick, our DFS sleeper pick of the year, Dong-Yup Kim. Is he still a guy you love?
I still like him for his price. I wasn't going to mention him today. I wasn't going to make a every single show mention because I think he has been fine over his last few games. Still interested in him for his price. Won't get the platoon advantage against Sampson, but Sampson is not an intimidating pitcher, and he's in the best hitter's park in the league. So pretty much always have interest in Dong-Yup Kim. It's too bad he's not really getting help from anyone else at the moment. Daniel Palka has just a single hit in his last 6 games. Ideally, with the platoon advantage against Sampson, he'd be somebody I'd be interested in. But it's tough at that with the way he's been hitting lately. Just hasn't really caught on fire over in Korea yet at all.
Yeah, and the entire Lions lineup is not looking good right now. The line, Lotte is favored here, minus 135. It's set at 11 runs. I would imagine most of those runs would have to come from the Giants offense. What's the pick here, Eric?
Yeah, definitely going Giants. Better lineup, better pitcher, even though Sampson's not dominant. It's really scary stretch from tie-in 1. Again, nearly a run per inning for 7 starts. And that's a poor enough performance that I feel confident enough in the over, despite it being fairly high and despite these being 2 on the whole not great lineups, even though the Giants have been decent. I would expect the Giants to score quite a few here, and I don't think Sampson's going to keep the slate completely clean by any means. So I think a 8-4, 7-5 is very possible here.
I like that. Sampson at one point looked like he could be the new Dan Straley. Right now, it's more just 3 runs in about 6 innings will get the job done here against the Lions. Moving on over to our third matchup, we have the Doosan Bears taking on the KT Wiz, and what I'd call the best matchup on the slate, maybe like that Hanwha game, Eric. But this game is looking great. We got Chris Flexen, who's going to be a very important pitcher for them coming down the stretch if they want to have a real chance to reclaim the title. His ERA is only at 4 his last 3 games, but his strikeout to walk numbers have been excellent, 24 to 3 walks. Are you confident in Flexen quieting the powerful KT Wiz offense that does indeed have Triple Crown hopeful Mel Rojas Jr.?
Yeah, this is what I was talking about, where the most exciting pitchers, Flexen and Kelly, are facing 2 of the best lineups, and we'll get to Hyun-Jung So in a second, too. I think he's probably the 3rd most interesting on the slate and also facing a great lineup in the Bears. I think you kind of have to go with one of those for DFS purposes, just because the bottom of the slate is quite sketchy. And I'd be happy enough with Flexen. Not an easy matchup here by any stretch, but he's been pretty good all season and lately. He had, I believe, a 3.80 ERA when he went down with a broken foot for nearly 2 months. And in his 5 starts since, he has an ERA of 3.81. So it doesn't really seem like anything has changed. He did actually improve his whip, 128 before the injury, 112 since. And in those 5 starts since he returned from the broken foot, 35 strikeouts against just 6 walks in 26 innings. So it's quite strong strikeout numbers lately. And I always love that for fantasy purposes because, even if he gives up some runs, you at least get the points from the strikeouts. Usually strikeout guys get their strikeouts. And he's at 24.8% strikeout rate on the year. Very close to Dan Straley, who's at 25.2% to give a comp. He's got about a half a percentage point higher walk rate, but those 2, he's quite close to Straley in both. And he's been striking out a ton of guys lately. Not saying he's necessarily overall the same pitcher as Dan Straley, because ERA in the high 3s isn't nearly as good as an ERA of nearly 2. But he's got some elements, at least in the putting guys away and not giving free passes, that he's up there with the best pitchers in the KBO. So I think that's enough here to make me pretty interested in him, even though he's got a tough matchup.
Definitely. Barry loves the matchup as well. In terms of the other starting pitcher in this matchup, so he has some solid strikeout numbers as well, 24 to 9 his last couple, 3 wins as well. He's a good pitcher. Are we confident in him facing off against the Bears offense that seems to have moved past their offensive miscues?
Yeah, not at all an easy task for him, especially against a pretty lefty-heavy Bears lineup. Definitely would not have had any confidence in so early. He's a 19-year-old rookie, entered the year just age 18, and looked very overmatched. In his first 9 starts, he had an ERA of 6.65. But the switch has definitely flipped for him. He hasn't allowed more than 3 earned runs in any of his last 12 starts. He's got an overall 2.38 ERA since then, so over 4 runs better than what he had in his first 9. And it's been sustainable. Again, it's been every single start. He hasn't allowed more than 3. And his strikeout numbers are picking up lately, too. In his last 4 starts, he struck out 22 batters in 22 1/3 innings. So he's nearly at a strikeout per inning, which is quite good at the KBO, given that the strikeout rate is in the high 17% over there compared to 23, maybe it's even 24-ish now in MLB. So he's becoming quite a good, trustworthy pitcher. Not super excited to use him against a Bears offense that is waking up, but given the general lack of alternatives, I think he's definitely playable.
All right, and I mentioned that Bears offense, and we take a look at the Deuce and Bears team page here on rotowire.com. Check out rotowire.com/free KBO to check out all these tools. They're second in the league, and when we look at their recent schedule, a whole ton of runs, 8.5 runs per game over their last 6. More importantly, they're 5-1 in that stretch, only a 1-run loss to the Wyverns during that. What are we expecting from the Bears offense entering a brand new week? Are they going to continue to rally and hold on to that 5th KBO playoff spot, or maybe they revert back to what we saw 2 weeks ago?
I would expect them to keep charging. I mean, they've been quite good for most of the year. It was really just a 2 or 3 week slump in late September that was totally out of character. And I think given the track records of most of the top 6 guys or so in their lineup, I would expect strong performances down the stretch. And, for whatever the intangibles matter, they're a team that's been here before. They've made 5 straight Korean series. They won 3 of them. A bunch of veterans who have performed in high-pressure situations. Don't necessarily place a ton of stock in that, but I think I would place at least a little, which I think should bode well for them down the stretch. It's going to be a ton of high-pressure games over the next few weeks because, again, each spot you advance up the standings at the end of the year effectively gives you a bye in the playoffs, and they're right in that mix. They're just 5th now, but they're only 3 games back of 2nd. If they can stay strong, they could well finish 2nd and be favored to meet the Dinos in the finals.
Yeah, it'll be a good matchup there. Something we thought would happen at the beginning of the season, that 1-2 in the standings, the Dinos, the Bears. Bears now just fighting for that playoff spot. I do have to mention the KT Wiz offense here. They are one of the better ones in the league. Not too shabby recently as well. 44 runs over their last 5 games. And the Mel Rojas Jr. Triple Crown update. He has the same number of 3-hit games this month as strikeouts this month, 3-3. Do you think he's going to get it? Do you think he is this one-man band that could power the Wiz to that playoff spot and to the Triple Crown?
I, again, don't think he's going to win the Triple Crown, mostly just because there's too much competition in batting average. I think he's right there. He's got a shot, but he's in 2nd right now, and there are several guys close. I think he's close to a lock to win the other 2 categories, though. I believe he's got a 4-homer lead on Roberto Ramos, who is currently injured, and the next closest guy is well behind, like 10 to 12 behind him, I believe. And he's got, I think it's an 11 RBI lead on Hassan Kim. So I think he's safe there, and I think it's going to come right down to the wire in batting average. Regardless of whether or not someone finishes a point or 2 ahead of him there, though, I think he's definitely been the guy who's carried the Wiz to almost certainly going to be their first ever playoff berth, and I think he should help them quite a bit in the playoffs and give them a chance to make it all the way for sure.
I like that. Tonight, though, might be a different story. They are the underdogs. Deucin is favored at -135. Total set at 10.5. Where are you going here, Eric?
Yeah. I'm going to go Bears. I like flexing a little bit more than Hyunjin So. I like the Bears lineup a little bit more. Both of those are quite close. And given how much I like both pitchers, I'm going to side the under, despite, again, the lineups being quite good. It's a pretty consistent run from Hyun Jung So, but Chris Flexen, I think, has stronger underlying numbers, and his ERA has not been much worse recently. So I think a deeper lineup from the Bears that's finally playing like it again, and a slightly better pitcher. But it's a very close one. I definitely wouldn't hate anyone picking the Wiz either.
Impressive. Okay, we're going with the under with these two teams facing off because of these excellent pitchers, at least excellent recently, despite injuries or whatnot. Moving into our fourth game, we do see a comment about the Dinos. We are getting to them after this matchup, so we will answer that question. But moving on to the Heroes and Eagles matchup. Eagles without Chad Bell. Not that he was a great pitcher, but Barry here noted that one less pitcher to fade each time through the rotation. But anyway, looking at the matchup tonight, Heroes pitcher Yoon, not expected to go long, hasn't gone more than 5 innings or even 5 innings at all this year. And Jang slightly with an edge. He can kind of be anywhere. His last 3 starts have seen an excellent one, 6 innings, 1 run, a horrible one, 4 innings with 5 runs, and then an average one with 5 innings and 3 runs. So what are we looking at with the Heroes-Eagles matchup?
Yeah, Shiwon Jung was a pitcher that I liked earlier in the year as a cheaper fantasy play. One of those guys that strikes out plenty of guys, but also walks too many and gives up some loud contact, leading to a pretty unimpressive ERA. But again, those guys, if you happen to get them on the day when the batted balls find fielders' gloves, and then you also get the strikeouts, that's a good way to get big upside in a DFS tournament for sure. But he has not been that guy lately. He hasn't struck out more than 4 batters. He struck out more than 4 batters just a single time in his last 11 starts. So he's pretty much mediocre 2 to 4 strikeouts every time out, which makes him pretty uninteresting when combined with an ERA in the high 4s. He's been even worse than that, though, in his last 4 starts. ERA of 6.75, whip of 177. 8 strikeouts against 14 walks over his last 4. So some really shaky recent performance from him. Makes me pretty interested in the Heroes hitters. But I'd be interested in the Eagles hitters also. Not that there's a ton of them who are inherently interesting. Though Brandon Barnes is hitting .341 in his last 10 games. And C1 No has an OPS of 1053 in his last 17, and 19-year-old infielder doing some interesting things lately. I haven't had the guts to recommend a full Eagle stack, maybe all season. I'm not remembering if I maybe did it in the first few weeks before we were aware of just how bad they were. This could have been a time to do it. I think there's enough other alternatives that I don't feel the need to go hard into the Eagles. But there's no reason to be scared of Junghyun Yoon for the Heroes at all. 3 starts, 11 relief appearances this year, an ERA of nearly 9. He does have a decent 3.60 ERA in the Futures League, so he's been not terrible. He was, I believe, like a 4th overall pick in 2019, so he maybe has some potential. He just hasn't shown any of it yet. Doesn't walk a lot of guys, 6.7% walk rate, but also a 6.7% strikeout rate. That's barely any strikeouts at all, just over a third of the league average. Hasn't thrown more than 4 innings in either the KBO or the Futures League since mid-July, and even then hasn't reached 5 innings. Sorry. So expect a short start from him and not a particularly good one. Again, that's enough to be interested in some Eagles hitters, but they're still Eagles hitters, so I'm not sure I'd go all in there.
Yeah, you kind of like these offenses, at least right now. On the Heroes side, they did take 2 of 3 against the Dinos, scored 15 total runs, and broke their losing streak. Eagles, not too shabby themselves, 22 total runs over their last 3, and actually have a 3-1 record over their last 4. We're thinking about Brandon Barnes, you mentioned him. The total is set at 10 runs. With the way these pitchers can perform and how short Yoon can go, do we think this is an easy over?
Yeah, I think it's definitely an easy over. Gonna side with the Heroes too. If Shi Wenjiang was who he was in the first half of the season, I think it might be enough to pick the upset, given how shaky Jung Hyun Yoon looks. It could well just be a bullpen game for the Heroes too, given that he's been mostly a reliever, though he has pitched 4 innings or so several times. So they might be aiming to get that out of him. But I think the Eagles will enjoy hitting off him for 4 innings or off whoever else comes in the third and fourth. But Heroes lineup is, I think, too good. Makes the difference here. I didn't actually really talk about Hassan Kim getting posted much earlier. Did want to mention I'll probably have something over the offseason on some of the KBO players coming to MLB. For those who play in dynasty leagues on the MLB side, or even, I guess, just single season leagues, breaking these guys down for next year. I think Kim probably has enough about him to make it. I don't think he's going to be a star in MLB by any means, but he does everything. He hits close to or over 300 most of his seasons in the KBO. He's averaged a 2020 season in each of his full seasons. He can play shortstop. He's not an elite shortstop, which means he's not going to be a particularly good one in MLB, but I think he should be able to at least spend some time there. I know Daniel Kim, who's the main Korean correspondent for ESPN, compared his defense to Jung Oh-gong, who was, I believe, a shortstop in KBO, but mostly played third base over here. Kim doesn't necessarily have quite the bat that Gong had in KBO. Gong had a 166 WRC plus over his 3 seasons before making the jump, whereas Kim has a 129, which, if he could play shortstop, I think that would definitely help him. I don't think he's got the bat to be a big league third baseman, but I think he should at least be able to play a role as a frequently used utility guy or something. So it's going to be interesting to see what teams are interested in him and where he lands this offseason.
Yeah, just going off that tangent there, the KBO is definitely capable of producing MLB talent. We saw last year a lot of American guys go to the KB and return. Darren Ruff, Josh Lindblom. I'm forgetting it. I think it's Brooks Raley, Seth Frankoff, a couple of guys just to name. Eric Thames, of course, the biggest name to go over, come back. So definitely Kim has the potential, but maybe not huge star potential like Hyunjin Ryu we're seeing. Overall, in terms of some other fan comments we do want to get to, Kim likes the Bears under. Talked about that. Unusual saying for a Deuce and Bears KT Wiz matchup that we would go with the under, but that's what we're doing with these 2 pitchers. And I did want to touch on the Dinos here. We went over them already, but any thoughts in terms of rest of the way here? Talking to JM's comment here about that bullpen help at the deadline.
Yeah, I mean, they are a flawed team. They're not a great bullpen. They did, unless I'm forgetting someone, the main trade I remember them making was for Kyung-Chan Moon, who was a closer for the Tigers, who was struggling before he was traded to the Dinos, and he's really been struggling since too. He hasn't been terrible, a 4.34 ERA since joining the Dinos. Decent enough, but not necessarily a shutdown weapon that they were maybe hoping they were going to get. So it's an imperfect team, shaky back of the rotation, not the best bullpen necessarily, but they have gotten all the way back up to first in runs allowed, as well as first in runs scored. So I don't want to overstate their flaws by any means. I don't think they're necessarily way better than the teams around them, but their recent hot streak suggests that they definitely are the best team in the KBO. And I believe that the team that has won the regular season has only lost twice in the last 15 or so years. So the odds of them not finishing first, given that they have a 7-game lead with 20-ish left to play, seem quite low. So I would expect them to get that bye directly into the Korean series. I would definitely think they're the most likely team to win at this point. But teams like the Bears, who have been there for quite a while, teams like the Heroes, who are pretty well-rounded, just maybe not quite as strong, teams like the KT Wiz, who apparently are much more well-rounded than we thought and have the best hitter in the league. LG Twins, too. If Ramos comes back and is healthy, they have also good pitching. So I think any of the other contenders I would not put as significant underdogs when they make it to the Korean series against the Dinos, but I do think the Dinos slightly better than the rest of them, and they basically can just cruise to the Korean series at this point, given the lead that they've opened up.
That's what we're looking at with the league-leading NC Dinos. Hope that answered your question there, JM. Moving over to our last matchup, 4 a.m. Eastern, as all these games are. SK Wyverns, Kia Tigers. We are getting some comments here on the Kia over. Looking at these starting pitchers, you can see some pretty ugly ERAs. Starting with him and the Tigers, ERA over 8 his last five outings, and his strikeout to walk numbers are a little unusual. Had some good performances, but then also some pretty bad ones. What do you think about the Tigers starter tonight?
Yeah, he's a guy who was very unimpressive last year. Looked like a back-end starter at best, ERA of 5-something, I believe. But he looked quite good at the start of this year, an ERA under 3 in his first 9 starts with the underlying numbers to match. Really was part of what I think made the Tigers into a real contender, really making that quite a deep starting rotation. But he just hasn't been anywhere close to that over his last 13 or so starts. And he's been quite bad in his last 3. In his last 3 starts, he has an ERA of 13.06 and a whip of 2.42. In his last 12 starts, it's an ERA of 7.76. So it's a very long stretch as basically unplayable. They keep running him out there because I guess he showed that potential early in the year and they didn't have much else. But it's been quite a while since he was anything close to reliable. So certainly wouldn't expect him to shut down the Wyverns here, even though they are one of the worst lineups in the league.
Yeah, not looking too good for aim when you look at those last 3 starts, not going deep into games and not striking out a ton of batters. Over to Park and the Wyverns. Park has a rough season ERA, but he might be on his best stretch this entire season. 10 innings pitched, 2 earned runs, just 7 hits over his last 2 starts. You're giving him and the Wyverns the edge tonight against the struggling Tigers.
I might have, except that in each of those 2 starts where he allowed only a single run, he walked more guys than he struck out. And he hasn't struck out more than he walked in any of his last 4. 13 strikeouts against 17 walks over that stretch. Maybe the fact that he did it twice in a row suggests he's found a way to succeed despite walking a batter per inning. He'd be more or less the first to ever do that. So I kind of doubt it. If he keeps showing this kind of command, I would expect him to put the Tigers base runners on all day. I actually had the Tigers as one of the recommended stacks today. I don't think Park is noticeably worse than several of the other names on here. But I do like the Tigers' top 2 lefties with the platoon advantage against a guy like Park, who has been all over the place his last several starts. Youngwoo Choi has actually moved ahead of Preston Tucker in OPS. He's now the Tigers' best hitter, their cleanup hitter, Youngwoo Choi. I believe he's 3rd among qualified hitters in OPS, with Tucker just behind him in 4th. So it's 2 of the strongest hitters in the league, and they unfortunately haven't gotten enough help from the rest of the lineup, which makes them a pretty mediocre lineup and a mediocre team on the whole. But those 2 guys, I think, are very interesting tonight against a guy who I would not expect to keep keeping runs off the board if he's walking a batter per inning.
Okay, so not looking too impressive with these pitchers and not confident in Park's recent 2 starts. I was impressed by them. But those walk numbers are very concerning going into the 3rd straight start with no control now. In terms of the Kia offense he's facing, you mentioned it, Choi. You got Preston Tucker right there as well in the 3-hole. They just have 1 win in their last 7 games, not even scoring 3 runs per game over that stretch. Are you worried about them going into the playoffs if they're still a playoff contender? And you think they can rally now coming down the stretch, like really coming down the stretch? Or are we pretty much crossing them out of the mix?
Not crossing them out, but quite close to it. They're 3.5 back now of the Bears, which again, that's not the team I'd want to be trailing, given that the Bears really were supposed to be better than this. I think they're maybe finally starting to wake up. I believe I said on our last show that the Tigers needed to probably go 6-1 this week against the Eagles and Wyverns, and they started off 1-3. So they're not doing that. They need to sweep the Wyverns, really, I think, to stay in it. Would probably favor them in any given game against the Wyverns or quite close to that. But I think their chances really took a hit with that 1-3 series against the Eagles. You just can't be doing that when you're trying to chase down one of the better franchises in the recent history of the league, or clearly the best franchise in the recent history of the league. So I would definitely not predict the Tigers to make it at this point. So again, it's just one hot streak and one cold streak from the Bears, and they are in it, but unlikely.
Definitely possible, but when you look at that upcoming schedule against the Dinos and the Twins, and then what they've done recently, of course, you can find all this and more on rotowire.com/free KBO. Not looking too good for this Kia Tigers team. For the Wyverns, moving over to their offense, they were shut out their last time out. 5 runs per game in their last 3 before that, though. You're pretty confident in them just because they're facing Im, who hasn't been very good recently.
Yeah, not super confident in many of them, but Jung Choi and Jamie Romack are usable most of the time. And I actually recommended Taigon O, their number 2 hitter, who hits right before them, on tonight's cheat sheet. He's somebody who came over in a midseason trade from the Wiz, was terrible in a part-time role for the Wiz, but he's hitting .315 in 39 games since the trade. Not a ton of power, but he's also stealing bases. I think he's a interesting enough cheap option given the matchup against Ki Young Im, who's been very shaky for a very long time.
All right. We're getting a lot of comments here for the pick. 9.5 runs is the total. Kia is favored. What is the pick here, Eric?
Yeah, I think that's way low. I don't trust either pitcher at all. Granted, the lineups aren't great, but that's the second lowest over-under on the day, and possibly it's probably, I guess, the second weakest set of pitchers after the one we just talked about. So pretty easy over there. And all side Tigers, I suppose Jung Hoon Park has been slightly better than Ki Young Im lately, even though both have been shaky. But I like the Tigers lineup more. I think the season-long numbers bear that out, even if they're a pretty mediocre unit. More confident, I'd say, on the total than the Tigers side of things here. But I would still definitely side their way.
I definitely have to agree, considering how bad the Kia Tigers have been recently. And the Wyvern just could surprise someone with maybe sweeping them. We'll have to see. Definitely love that. 9.5, though, and the Kia Tigers. A lot of action here coming up on time. What are the top 3 picks here, Eric? A lot of people in the comments saying he might start with that Kia Tigers SK Wyverns over 9.5. Where are you going to go, though?
Yeah, I wish the hitters were better, but it's still too low of an over-under. So I think I agree with the crowd there. I think that is going to be number 1 for me. Number 2, I think is going to be the under in that Bears Wiz. Bit of a worry given the lineups, but Flexen and So have both been quite good for quite a while now. I suppose either of them could snap, or some reliever could have a terrible game, but it's a fairly high over-under for 2 of the best pitchers on the slate. So I think I'd go that way. And for the third one, I think I'm going to go Giants over Lions. Could have gone a few different directions here. I could have gone with Casey Kelly over Sung Young Choi is quite possibly definitely the biggest gap in pitching. So I think that's definitely in consideration for top 3. But, Lions Dinos are such a good lineup that a little bit shaky there. I just think in the Giants versus Lions, just, again, nearly a run per inning over Taiwan Wan's last 7 starts, do we say it was? I don't think the Giants have to be an elite offense to be pretty heavily favored there, given that Sampson looks decent lately. So I think that's enough for them to be number 3 for me. But most of the things I'm seeing in the chat are pretty strong contenders for top 3 as well.
Yes, that includes Barry's pick here, Kia Tigers over, like you said, Lotte, and maybe LG because of that pitching matchup. Casey Kelly looking like what we expected him he should do, considering what he did last year. A lot of comments here. Again, top 3 picks tonight over 9.5 in that Kia SK game, which you can find out right here. Check out the expected lineups on rotowire.com/free. As the first pick, number 2, under. Despite those elite lineups, we are going under 10.5 because of the elite, even more elite pitchers. And then finally, the toss-up between LG and Lotte. Going to side with Lotte because the Lions are so bad, substantially worse than the NC Dinos. That's all we got. Barry agreeing with you as well. And that's all we got for you. Thank you for tuning in. Josh, you can catch the replay on Periscope and YouTube. Check that out for each game breakdown, and talked about some KBO League news as well. Hassan Kim is going to Major League Baseball sometime next year to some team. He's being posted, and the Heroes manager did step down despite them ranking number 3 in a lot of categories this season. And that's what we're looking at. And that's all we got. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday, I do believe. Eric, any final words, any final thoughts on the KBO standings, as well as we are only a couple shows left here with KBO Chats Live with the regular season?
Yeah, again, it's a super tight battle, 2 through 5. Tigers and Giants might become part of that, but I think we're really going to see the advantage of that KBO playoff system, where every spot you advance in the top 5 is worth a bye, which is going to make, I think, every game matter for the Wiz, Heroes, Twins, and Bears over the final few weeks. I think we're in for some quite exciting baseball here.
Should be. And as always, check out rotowire.com/free KBO for more, and follow us on Twitter at RotoWireKBO. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Thanks for coming, everybody.